All right, student of COMP2221. Today I'm going to teach you how to build a graphical user interface application from Visual Studio. Now, when you open up Visual Studio, you can create a new project. Now, you will choose C#, which is the language that we have been learning, a Windows application. Now, this one, instead of the usual console application, this time we will choose the desktop applications. As I've mentioned to you, there are two types of graphical user applications in Visual Studio. The first one is window forms. The second one is WPF. And today we'll be doing WPF. And we'll be using not this one, but the one with the .NET framework. So there's one called WPF app.NET framework. This is the one that we will be using. We press next. Now give this a name. And create a project. Now you can see that after a while, you'll see the graphical applications that you are going to develop. Now, the first one you can try is to build and run it, even though it's an empty window. So I build a solution. It's just like a console application. And then I can run it. All right, so you have an empty window. This is a good beginning. Now, in this application, in this solution, you have several files. The one that is showing here, XAML file, which is corresponding to this one, represents the graphical user interface elements that you are going to design on. And then there is also a .cs file, which represents the functionality that you're going to implement with the Visual Studio source code, C# source code. So you can expand this one, and then you will see this one. So you can see that this one is the C# source code for the functionality. This one is something like an XML file in which you try to define the window elements, the positions, what kind of elements do you have, and so on. So in theory, you can just tap here and say, I want to have a new button. And then you'll see a new button on top of the screen here. In practice, it might be a bit troublesome to tap. So Visual Studio actually developed a user interface, a graphical user interface for you to build a graphical user interface applications. Let's say if we wish to have a button, we can just drag it here. Now we can also resize our button. You can see that the source code is changing correspondingly according to what I do in this graphical user interface. This is very convenient. So what we'll usually begin with is to give this button a name. So I would just say BTN stand for button, test, a test button. Now I might also wish to change something on the button, like the appearance and the text on the button, okay? So there are quite a lot of things that you can change, and I would suggest that you try them through yourself. Say, for example, you can change the button color. Say, for example, the border color, the background color, and then the foreground color, which means the text color. Okay, so let's say I wish this to be blue. And then I can also change the text format. So say, for example, if I wish to change the font, make it bigger. Now you can see that correspondingly, your source code is changing as well. But the good thing is that you don't need to worry too much about the source code because you have an interface and you can just change in the property windows. Now, if you don't see the property windows, you can probably find them in the view. And then there should be the property window here. Yeah, F4. So sometimes people close them and they cannot find them anymore. It's here, okay? Right, now I have make a button. I have changed the color. How about changing the text? So this is where the common part will be there. So basically, if I change the content from button to my text, And then I will be able to see that corresponding text is changed. I can try to debug and run it. So build, debug, start without debugging. You can see your first button is done. Okay, so you can click on it and so on. Now, right now, when you click on it, there's no functionality. This is because, this is because you haven't implemented any source code. So the next thing that we'll be doing is to implement some source code. As I have mentioned in the lecture, or as I will be mentioning in the lecture, you can associate event with this button and with this form as well. So let's say if we wish to associate events with this button, what shall we do? We go to this lighting symbol button, and then there are all sorts of events that we can work on. Now, you will probably need to read a bit of documentation to know what they mean, but I think the one that we are going to work on is click. So when the button is click, we wish to do something. So I wish to associate a function with this button's click event. What I do, I just type in a name of the function. Say, for example, I wish the name to be on btn as click. And I press enter. You can see that Visual Studio will develop the function header for me to work on. And this function is corresponding to the event of this button when button is clicked. Okay. So now if I say something here, let's say if I say btn test.content. So I wish to change the content when it's clicked. And then I can debug and run it. So when I click it, you can see that button text is changed because of the source code I have written here. All right. Now, Visual Studio also enable you to debug the source code line by line, even if it's a GUI application as well. So if I put a breakpoint here, if I build, if I debug and start debugging, now you can see that currently the button test is test, right? And then if I click it, now we come to the debug window. Right now, you can see that the button test is, the content of the button is test. And if I run this line of code, debug, step over, then yeah, the button content becomes clicked. I can continue. And then the program will continue like this. So debugging functionality is actually quite important. Now, there are a few more things that you might be interested in. Say, for example, if I wish to initialize something immediately after immediately after the window is created, where should I put the source code in? I can put it around here. So there's a main window, initialize component. After this line, if you put something in, the source code will be run after the window is created. So let's say if I change this to initialized. Okay, and you can see that once the window is started, once the application has started, the test has changed. Now, this is very useful if you wish to put some initialization source code into your program. This is the right place to put in. I can also try to drag in a bit more controls. Say, for example, I can drag in something called a label. A label is just displaying some text. So I can say LBL, a label. And I can also change the content of it as well. I can also put in a test board. The test board allows us to enter some text. So again, I can say, give it a link. And then, well, the text in the test board is called text rather than content. So enter something, say for example, yeah. And when I run it, you will be able to enter something here. You'll be able to see the label here. So those kinds of controls are very basic to begin with. Now, finally, there's a few more things. Say, for example, this control on the background of the window is something we call a grid. Now, grid allows us to change the color of the background, say, for example, or let's say, or add in some sort of measurement like this one to align the Windows elements. Say I can align these things at this point. So grid allows us to do that. Now this is the grid. Behind the grid would be your main window. So behind your grid, this one will be your main window. Now in the beginning, a lot of students will get confused. Am I selecting the grid or am I selecting the window? Now, if they are of different sizes, of course, you can see them. Now I'm selecting the window, I'm selecting the grid. But if they are exactly the same size, then sometimes you get confused. So if you see this kind of control, like the alignment points here, then you're selecting the grid. Now, if you wish to select the window, it's very simple. Just press escape, the escape character, and then you will be selecting the windows. Now, you can then interact with the windows, like the events of the window. What if the window is closing? If you wish to do something when the window is closing, then you can set a command here, so name a function here, say on window closing. You can give any name you want, and this will be the events when your main window is closing. Your grid has another set of corresponding commands as well. So I'll leave it for you to explore. Now, this is the basics of getting your first GUI application running. So I hope it is useful. There'll be more interesting tasks waiting for you in this practical.